The Why Didn't You Test That podcast want to improve your software. The team at Curiosity and their guests share experiences and insight on the many sides of better software delivery.
You've just started talking on the intro.
Yeah, I know. Look, this is prime mini pod stuff, right? Like, it's not allowed to be too structured.
So welcome everybody to Why Didn't You Test That After Hours? So this is a short form podcast, a younger brother, let's say, of our main Why Didn't You Test That podcast, where we take a water cooler, or for the UK people, a vending machine conversation around things that are going on in our world, things that are going on in our guest world, just a general chit chat around testing, what's going on at the moment, what do we get involved a lot in. I'm Rich Jordan, Solutions Enterprise Architect here at Curiosity Software. Joining me today, I've got Ben Riley. Hi, Ben. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Hello, Ben Riley. Yes, Chief Troublemaker here at Curiosity. And behind the scenes, or normally behind the scenes, Paul Wright, you are with us today.
Yep, very much behind the scenes. And customer success, but that's like owned by everybody. So putting some visual elements to that.
All right, fantastic. Look at that. Where do you want to start, Rich?
So I guess the easiest thing to do is kind of what's the most common themes in the past. We speak to a lot of customers, a lot of different areas. What's the kind of the common themes that you're having conversations with today?
I mean, on the horizon, I've got a webinar around test data strategies. I'm also into how different value is interpreted, and this is probably the third time I've mentioned it. But I can't remember who it was, this chap talking about mirrors in lifts or elevators. There was a complaint that it was taking way too long to go up and down, or you're waiting in a hotel lobby for too long because the lifts are taking too long. And there were sort of multi-million pounds investments being planned to replace pulleys and brakes so that they can move faster. And then one person suggested just put mirrors, so mirrors in the lifts and in the lobbies. And actually, all the complaints went away because people were just sort of happy to wait a little bit longer.
Looking at themselves.
Yeah. So it's like, that's an interesting, take on value and vanity, I guess, in some ways. So yeah. So is that not the kind of a similarities with goldfish that only have kind of attention span or memories of 3 seconds or things like that? Is that a similar sort of vibe in that? Look, you can say that out loud, right? You can get in trouble. I will avoid such commentary. But yeah, there's a bit of that. I was thinking about this. About asking a couple of questions for the After Dark pod, somewhat erroneous, random. It's more about some things that you've had maybe happen in your testing career that have maybe not gone so well. I noticed on most podcasts, people like to talk about the good side of their testing experiences. We reduced this, we added that. Have you had any absolute catastrophic failures? Anything gone miserably wrong, or broken in manners that maybe it shouldn't have?
Many, I think.
Good.
I think you'd be lying otherwise, right? In my experience, this is where you get into, you should expect software failures in software, right? And, talk about the post office thing in kind of more recent history. I wasn't involved in that, by the way. But, almost... I started my career exploring automation. I was very lucky to have a role where I was kind of given free rein around exploring different frameworks and things like that. I was a graduate software tester, okay? And so cheap resource, play around with lots of different things, right? And so my whole career from that point forward has been a experiment, fail, learn, kind of fix forward, fix better. Right, and almost you could plot it right the way through. And I think there's an interesting dynamic in your question in terms of almost catastrophic failure only happens if you try and, I think, cover up kind of misdemeanors along the way. And I guess through my failures along the way, I've learned to kind of be very visible about kind of the failures you make, learn around them, explain why it's happening, face into why it's happening, look to put it right. And I guess I've been a leader of people making mistakes. That sounds bad. For many, many years, right? But try and turn that away into a more positive thing. I think a lot of kind of catastrophic failure is through an environment of fear. And so a lot of kind of a leader's responsibility is create psychological safety where people can experiment, people can create mistakes and feel comfortable in making those mistakes and owning up to them and rectifying them. I think
agreed.
because that's kind of been the mindset, catastrophic failure, I don't think happens. I think it's quite interesting to flip it on its head in terms of being in organizations where there have been kind of production incidents. Again, it's an interesting way of looking at how the organization reacts to organizational incidents, right? And ironically, the name of this podcast is Why Didn't You Test That? I've been in rooms where it's been asked, why didn't test that? Right? And the fact that there were no requirements, or requirements were known to be quite scarce, the fact that designs were known to be out of date, but yet we're focusing all of our efforts on why didn't you test that, right? And again, I think there's an element of the right psychological safety needs to be there to make sure that these things don't happen that way. I think failure is inevitable, right? It's just how you react to them, I think, is the key.
Sounds like a Jurgen Klopp halftime speech, mate. Look,
I went on a bit, didn't I? What about yourself, though? What about yourself? I guess
I've had some good ones. Yeah, I've had some really good ones. I mean, this mini pod, who knows? We'll see where we end up here. No, one of the funniest. There's some servers that we had that basically would print out letters. So if you're, after your doctor's appointment in the hospital, whatever. All the printing goes to a central room typically. So it's not just, there's lots of printers around the place. You have one room with all the printers in. And I was showing him that sometimes there'll be error messages. This is quite a long time ago. Error messages will pop up and it would stop the server working. It couldn't carry on with this error that was there, which fundamentally poor design. But anyway, and I said to him to close it down. What I said was the wrong instruction, a poor requirement, to use your term, close down the server instead of just exiting the session, so leaving the server running in the background. And I would say about 10 seconds after that window closed, the phone rang to wonder why all the letters had stopped printing, basically.
Which reminded me, I was on LinkedIn earlier on, and there was a meme kind of picture around, and the meme said about accidentally testing in production, or testing in the wrong test environment, right? And so for anyone listening to this, is a brilliant tip, right? When you finish a transaction, there's probably a piece of functionality in the system to auto redirect you back to the start. It's probably auto redirecting you to the production environment, all right? So watch out for that one. Top tip for this podcast.
That's a great tip. We did that.
Fallen victim to that one.
Training once. No, so we did that for some training. We were training some people in how to use a piece of our software, and we built a dummy site. And on one of the sites, there were loads of bugs, and on the other side, there was none. And then what would happen is we'd start them on the one with all the bugs, but one of the first bugs they find would move them over to the other side. And it was hilarious after they're like, I've replicated this bug. Like, you should, like, and there's loads of stuff like, password fields, just letting you do whatever, blah, blah, blah. Super simple stuff to pick up. Well, quite hard to spot a URL change by, a degree. So some frustrated people at the end of the 20 minutes, you're like, oh, actually, guys, did you notice you're testing the wrong thing? No. Okay. Paul, you're not from the world of quality and test is in terms of our typical sphere. What's your sort of, I guess, crossover to this, right? What's your catastrophic failure for not testing something? I'm sure there must be one. There's got to be one hiding in there somewhere.
Well, I think let's deal with the A, and then maybe we go to B.
We'll see where B ends up, shall we?
Yeah. I think catastrophic failure is like learning that communication is key. Because I was responsible for a training course, getting people skilled up in multimedia. And for me, it was like, wow, let's just go with this. It's a new idea. But then it was competing with another department. I got a phone call from the department saying, in fact, we already do training. And I'm like, yeah, but this is slightly different. It's geared at professionals and yours is geared at trainees. So that was a wake-up call that you can go all in enthusiastically, but unless you see how it fits the business, it didn't fit the business, really, what I was doing. And that was a really good learning that happens.
a slight panicky moment.
And it also triggered some new communication, and also, like, what do we do? Do I undo all that work? But then it was like, how do we adjust it, fit it into the bigger picture? And I think it did good for the small organization. It was a training, and it was a cinema training organization for TV and video and multimedia. But I think it did a lot to, it prompted some communication that was not going to happen otherwise. So I think these failures are useful in that respect. And
it's amazing the parallels, isn't it? Just from, everybody's different experiences in, quotation marks in test, but just for different stuff. Often how
that's
many mistakes are made, but they're great, right?
But you described experimentation there, didn't you? And being not afraid to experiment. Actually, you learned something from it. It's almost the same as kind of the journey that I talked about, right?
Yeah,
I agree.
And I think I was experimenting from it seemed of an ignorant point of view that this will just promote us further, when in fact it was internal competition.
Yeah,
that could have been detrimental to the the product that we're trying to give, and that's training.
Agreed. So look, as this is the mini pod, the After Dark as well. So the last podcast was around higher educational.
Calling it After Dark, and it's like, I think it's After Hours, but I think they're the same thing on
it. It's not dark yet.
It's not dark, actually. Could be. It depends when you're watching it. Context. So it was about higher education. If you were to summarize that content down for somebody to sort of pick up and decide, do they want to go back and have a butcher's through, what were we sort of saying? What conclusions we get to?
I think, and this is not meant to be derogatory about higher education. They are primarily an education capability, not a software company, right? And so there is challenges to the way that higher education institutes do IT, and that's fundamental around it. They will buy predominantly off the shelf capabilities. Inevitably, if you're doing that, you need to customize it. And so there is a big problem around articulating what needs to be customized, actually making those customizations, the whole implementation between software vendor and higher education. They can't maintain big IT teams. And so there is an element of outsourcing to that kind of third-party provider, and then a lot of it in terms of user acceptance at this stage. So, in terms of your general testing practice, almost they're a bit of an anti-pattern in terms of right shifting a lot of the things because they can't, they don't have the spend to be able to do, and they're not an IT development company. So, they can't do a lot of the shift left, get involved in that early design phase as much as they would like to. I think there was an evolution, and they would like to do some of these things. You get certain higher education institutes around the world that are kind of experimenting in new ways of working, but they're always going to be a bit hamstrung by resources, by the nature of the fact they are higher education. There's an interesting one around the way that things are paid for. So and the way Nalin explained it is that, if you are a chancellor of a university, you're never going to get your name put on a kind of a software system, but you will probably on a building. So there is an element of kind of people in this as well. But it's a really interesting conversation. Almost IT challenges we normally talk about layering on a big chunk of higher education and why it is what it is.
It's interesting, isn't it? The difference between, I guess, environments like industries and how they have to adapt and evolve to come over. Yeah. So what somebody else might see as something super straightforward, and for them is an absolute nightmare, and then potentially vice versa, right? So, good. So next time, what's up next? So we spoke about some catastrophic failures. Maybe we should think about some things we've done all right. Maybe, so it's not all bad. We'll have a think about some of the topics for next time. Sound good?
Yeah.
Great.
Sounds good.
Brilliant. We'll sign it off. We'll leave it there. Thanks, guys.
Cheers all. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Why Didn't You Test That podcast. To continue the conversation, head over to curiositysoftware.ie. And don't forget to subscribe for more episodes.